Hey, how's it going? On this episode of Home Water Dispatch, I'm not anywhere exotic. I'm actually in my office on campus at UMass, Western Massachusetts, Pioneer Valley, big, nice green space behind me. Can't quite see it, it's blown out in the window. Anyway, I'm using this episode of Home Water Dispatch to kind of reflect on kind of what it's like to be a research scientist at a big institution like UMass. We call them R1 institutions, where there's lots of graduate students and lots of primary research that's going on. And a lot of the stuff that I clearly do focuses on recreational fisheries for the past 20 plus years. And this is the time of year when I get a ton of emails from graduate students that are reaching out, or prospective graduate students, students that want to either do their master's or their PhD in my lab. And I probably get 3 to 5 to 10 emails a week this time of year, people looking ahead to the fall of 2025. Yeah, you got to think that far ahead. You know, I have a suite of projects that I have ongoing. I have ones that I'm working on and writing grants for, and that's that grant money that actually fuels the positions that I can afford to bring on graduate students to do some of this important work on the species that we like to target. You know, I've got projects now that are focusing on golden dorado, thanks to grants from IGFA. I've got a project now focused on stable isotopes and tarpon, thanks to a big grant from Bonefish and Tarpon Trust. But there's lots of stuff going on. There's so many different species out there that we like to target. There's so many environmental concerns about, you know, whether it's habitat or catch and release or climate change and all sorts of things. The number of things that we need to address are huge in terms of the conservation of our recreational fisheries, even the fish that we don't like to target in terms of recreational fisheries, like environmentally, you know, those home waters, understanding the connection between species and habitat. It's all really important, right? And it has value. It's connected to our personal identity as anglers. It goes on and on and on. And it's also a time of year when I get a lot of emails from people, not just prospective graduate students, but people email me and be like, hey, I've got this really big threat to my home waters or the species that I like to target, and I need your help, and you should put a graduate student on it. You have students, you should put them on this project. Well, the reality is grad students cost money. I wish they didn't, but we have to support them financially. And there's a misconception that the university just gives me a whole bunch of money to do all this science. We have to write the grants to support the students and to actually physically support and actually undertake the research that has to go on. Going out in the field, buying equipment, travel, and supporting the graduate students. You know, like occasionally there are some students that come with their own funding, and that's wonderful, but that's pretty rare. And so the reality of this is that it takes a considerable amount of money in order to do this type of research. And just, you know, and I can't tell you how often I have to remind people that, you know, a big institution like UMass, they provide me with a wonderful office. You know, I taught this morning on recreational fisheries in a graduate class just down the hall. You know, they provide me with the foundation and the infrastructure to apply for grants. But it's not like they give me a whole bunch of money to do the science, to do the research. And so that's where it comes into like having to write big grants to federal agencies and to nonprofits like BTT and IGFA and, you know, other organizations. I also, because of the nature of the work that I do, I've sort of developed a diversified fundraising stream where I get some federal grants. I have a big project now that's been focused on the catch and release of striped bass, funded by Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute Sea Grant. So part of NOAA, which is great, federal agency focusing on striped bass and catch and release. The downside is that there's, again, so many different things that we need to tackle. There's a lot of government agencies that don't necessarily fund research on recreationally targeted species. And the competitive nature of getting those grants is really high. You can write the best grant proposal and you could bring the best information and the best team together, and it could be based on, whether you're successful or not, could be based on maybe regional distribution of how they have to spread out the money, the granting agency or the sponsor. So it could just be dumb luck that you don't get the support. It kind of sucks because it takes days, if not weeks, to write these grants. And you also have to be able to forecast. It's not like you submit a grant and 2 weeks later you find out that you've got hundreds of thousands of dollars to do the research. It could take months and months and months and months before you find out. And then it could take more time for the money to actually hit an account at UMass so that I could even spend the money or hire a grad student, bring them on to actually collaborate with to do their research. So there's a lot that goes into it. And the other thing that I also want to use this episode of Home Water Dispatch to do is to even talk about the indirect costs. So yes, UMass provides me with this great office and a lab space that's mostly just a storage closet because most of my lab is out there, right? I do a lot of field work. But big institutions like this, charge an indirect rate or overhead. And on federal grants, that's over 60% now. So for every dollar that I bring in terms of grant money, 60 cents will go to the university. Or another way to think about it, if I put a budget together to go do more research on golden dorado or tarpon or GTs or trout in the hills over here, if I put a budget together and it's $100,000, if I'm going to a government sponsor, I probably that number has to increase to about $160,000 because the university is going to take a big cut. It's different for nonprofits. It's a different cut for other things, donations and all the things, and gifts and philanthropy. And so in order to keep this giant engine going, right, and for me to continue to bring on really good graduate students, have a wonderful team of collaborators in the form of students. I see my students as collaborators. We need to raise the money. We need to think about very strategic ways to do so. We have to be able to forecast, to look at some of these really pressing issues related to our fish and our habitat and their habitat and the home waters. Again, with the perspective that I bring to my lab, it's really using a diversified fundraising stream of going after, larger grants through federal agencies, knowing that there's challenges there, going after nonprofits that support research. I've been very grateful and thankful for the support that I've received over, decades. And also really, tap into philanthropy and donations. And, there are actually ways that helps as well. The more that I can do these things, have a diversified portfolio for funding, the more, research projects that I can undertake, the bigger my lab can be, the longer I can support students, and that we can build, again, sort of bring science to the table to create more informed advocates and activists for the future of our the fish that we love to target as anglers, their home waters, their habitats, and the economy that recreational fishing supports. And I realize, I'm pretty heavy on the idea of focusing on recreationally targeted species. Part of that's my passion. Part of it is there's a huge need. And so I'm going to continue to fight the good fight. But I also wanted to use this episode of Home Water Dispatch for that big reality check that I wish I just had an army of wonderful students, at my beck and call to throw onto projects when people approach me to come help them fight their fight and bring science to the fight. But that's not always the case. And I wish I was able to take on more graduate students to meet that demand. But it all comes down to funding, and I'm not going to give up. And I hope this has been a really important Home Water Dispatch that just kind of sets the record straight. It's just the way it is. Anyway, it's still sunny out, so I'm going to make my way home. Go check out other episodes of Home Water Dispatch on my YouTube channel, Fish Forward. All right, see you later. Why won't that stop? This is a little like outtake, but it's not really an outtake. It's not stopping.